Your mic is very amped out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. You're like, it was very loud at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, hold on.
Okay, that's better, I think.
All right, we're actually recording right now, so I will cut that prior conversation.
It's pretty funny though. You can listen to it. It's hilarious. It's like, and
But yeah, so to our audience members, I know there's a lot out there. We've had, we haven't done a video in a while, and it's because I've been helping Joe Rogan find the new area to record in since the Spotify deal has been going on. He's been going a lot of fire for it. People are saying he's selling out, and I just want to get the message that he shared to me. He's a human too, everyone.
I mean,
So
he's a struggling artist, right? You got to help him out where you can.
no, he's hurting from these comments.
Right.
I'm being real. Yeah, he's lost a lot of hair, and
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, dude.
So actually, speaking of,
right now, I've seen him.
Since you've been working with Joe so closely, there's actually been a lot of fun debate about whether Sam Hyde can be on the podcast or not.
Yes,
It's been very entertaining where like people would suggest that he brings Sam Hyde onto the podcast on his subreddit or wherever else he has his Twitter, and he just insta bans them if they even mention Sam Hyde's name.
Do you think it's him that bans him, or is it the moderators that do it?
I think it's the mods, obviously, if it's on a subreddit. But the fact that somebody decided, let's just permaban everything that even mentions him, like Sam Hyde, he's been very active on his Instagram feed, which I know you don't use Instagram that much, but he's been very active on it, being like, Joe Rogan, let me on the podcast. And he just won't let him. It's been very entertaining.
That is pretty funny. Yeah, I was on the Sam Hyde group, and I noticed the admin started posting all this domestic abuse guidelines shit, and I'm like, okay, that's a little bit weird. And then all of a sudden, the name got changed to Incels United. I guess it was like a joke on their part.
Oh,
and
wow.
Like, what the fuck? Who changed this shit? And then, I don't know, it's been pretty funny.
Yeah, I've seen some of those memes recently where it's like a group dedicated to being fans of something, and they're like, has been changed to vor porn or something. So like the thousands of people that are in it because they like, Celine Dion appreciation fan group or something are now in like shit and vor porn appreciator
well, that's
group.
a level of art, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean it's funny, right?
It could have been a little more lighthearted with it.
Anyway,
like
so
white girls.
so pretty much when we started, like the first episode of this, I think, was during the pandemic. Yeah, every time we've met to talk, it's been during the pandemic, I think. So this has kind of been spanning, and we're still in the midst of it. As of recording today, it is August 29th. I believe the first one of these we did was around March, was around the beginning of the pandemic, and it's still going on, especially here in America. It's less in certain areas of the world. Like I think New Zealand is totally fine now, but America, being the greatest country in the world, obviously is falling behind everybody, and we are still having major problems. So right now, I'm a teacher, so all of my classes are being taught online. I have to teach online and everything. And you wanted to talk about civil unrest and people starting to maybe bring some chaos into the world. And I think it ties partially to the pandemic. I mean, obviously, it's a direct tie, especially here in America. But you want to try to harken back to the French Revolution and some Soviet stuff that you saw. So if you want to start on that, we can get the ball rolling here.
Yeah. I'll just briefly touch on the Soviet systems. I know you can't comment on, but I thought it was kind of interesting. I remember watching this video way back when. It was of an ex-KGB agent, and he was commenting. This was during the Cold War, so I think the 80s. This was when it was filmed, and they had an area in India that they were like the Soviets had control over, and he actually defected and he dressed up as a hippie and he escaped. But he was mainly commenting on they had these useful idiots, they would call them, that they would get them in from America or like England, these like kind of dumb intellectual type pseudo intellectuals, and they would like kind of show them like the best areas of Russia and kind of do like a North Korea on them, like how North Korea does that now with what was it, that famous basketball player? I can't remember his name, but yeah. Anyway,
Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, they do it with them, and they go basically and espouse this bullshit rhetoric, that there's nothing going on, with it, and it's a great country. And let's see, I watched this movie with my mom recently, and when I was listening to this, I thought it was a little bit too much. It was like a tell-all story, and I thought it was a little bit, I had a little bit doubts too because it's just one guy and everything. When I was watching this movie with mom, this was based on real fact. It was on a Welsh a journalist who actually interviewed Hitler before World War II, and he went to Russia to speak, I believe, to the Tsar, or which would, sorry, not the Tsar, the Russian leader, which would be Stalin, I think, at the time. So he actually escaped the control where they were trying to put him in, and he went to the Ukraine, which is a country that was under Soviet Union control. He saw like all the starving, like dead people there. It was a giant ass famine, and it was terrible. And they capture him. For some reason, they didn't kill him. Why they didn't was beyond me, because that's not beneath them at this point. But and he goes back to England and he writes about it. But they have another guy in Russia who writes for the New York Times who denounced him, and they basically gave him everything. Gave him a good house. I think they gave him a bride, like a really beautiful Russian woman, or he could have had a wife already. But anyway, he basically was given anything of the earth to basically just bullshit right for them. And it was like a debated thing for a while whether or not there was actual famine going on, which is really crazy. So they actually did have these intellectual types that went off there. And I thought that was really interesting. They had a very powerful control, and they were able to really quell any civil unrest, to tie back in, by just killing anyone, any dissidents. So we'll juxtapose this to the book I'm reading on the French Revolution, which is like the polar opposite of it, where the mob actually really ruled the government at this point. And this book is so crazy. There's so much shit going into it. I could barely briefly cover it. For example, like at one point there was a Frenchman who was like captured by the Spaniards because they started invading France, and he was like up in a tower, and he managed to construct a kite, and he like flew down into like a ship and escape control. And I don't know, just so much crazy shit going on. But anyway, basically it was they tried to remodel themselves after the US. And they wanted their own kind of, freedom, civil freedom. And they stole the king, right, and everything. They tried to keep the king, but they wanted like the aristocracy down. They wanted everything that the aristocrats had, and they tried to keep that in like distance, and they tried to like have everyone like happy. But eventually the mob, all these like brief moments of riot and unrest came down, and the government would fall sway to them, and they basically got their way. They literally like killed off all the aristocrats. They either chopped them to bits or they like pulled the guillotine, which was the trademark at the time. They executed the king and then the queen, and it was just really crazy. But they really had no formula or like a constitution. It was being written like within the day, and then they started killing off the people who wrote it, and then they had a new form of people to rewrite it. So it was just chaos, and it was really unrest and unrule, conflagration all across the country, as the writer puts it. I would say that that is quite like now. There is a lot of riots and stuff based on words and instincts. I think a lot of biases getting to the point where they think the enemy, the opposing side, needs to be quelled and stopped. And I mean, there is literal conflagration, in Kenosha, Seattle, New York, to name a few. Very a lot of unrest going on. It's going to get worse for the election, I think. It kind of tied in. It's very weird. While during this, the pandemic happened, which just kind of adds to the fire. Kind of, yeah, it's crazy.
Right. I think especially like you mentioned earlier with the pseudo intellectuals being brought over to like being shown a very tailored view of the area that they're going to, and in a way that relates to modern day where statistics, especially dealing with the pandemic or current riots, we're being very much lied to, and in some instances blatantly, and a lot of times it's pointed out, whether that's for political gain, whether that's for monetary gain, it doesn't matter, because a lot of it is confusing, especially to people that don't already understand the statistics or the background of it. So in a way, everyone everyone nowadays feels like a pseudo-intellectual because we have the ability to access all these great wealths of information, and our opinions are more widespread. We feel like we are more the Ubermensch than someone else, although our opinions might be very, very different. So there's a literacy in both the stats, but then there are, I guess, like I mentioned, everyone feels like a pseudo intellectual, so everyone has an increased ego nowadays. So it's a really big conflating factor of my opinion is better than yours, and I'm going to agree with these, even though they might not be right, to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. So it's a lot of captain goes down with the ship thing happening nowadays. And if you are to sway your pseudo intellectuals, which would be modern day every single American, then you get this just huge fight going on where people are, like you're mentioning, one side wants the other beheaded for something that now it really doesn't warrant that. We have
Right.
rules we've learned, but everyone is going straight to the throat. No one's stopping to talk about these things and go through with them. Everyone's like, one thing I like to look at a little bit further. This might get a little touchy for some people, but I think the like punch a Nazi thing, I understand where everyone's coming from on that, but it's the same problem of everyone's ego is so inflated and they see any piece that doesn't agree with their highly constricted, pigeonholed worldview, that you're pretty much you're letting yourself fall into your own fallacy. No one's thinking outside of the box or looking at what we're being shown, or that we're forced to disagree with each other based on what we're being fed from the top down. And that was a really long-winded, I guess, phrase there, but it's in agreement with what you're mentioning, and how it's kind of been, the flames have been stoked through not only the pandemic but also the riots, especially here in America. You might see that less in other countries, but now there's so many things going on that everyone just wants to be right, I guess. And being online for most everything now is only going to make it worse.
Yeah, Joe Rogan was saying your words exactly. I mean,
Oh, what? Okay, thank God.
shit's thrown into it and shit. But yeah, um, yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm trying to remember the punch and Nazi. That was when it first started. It was because this alt right dude. I cannot remember his name. The shitty dude. He was doing an interview and someone just punched him in the face, and it was kind of funny. But yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
I remember thinking,
That is
oh, what?
definitely very entertaining, and I like that. But people conflate
No,
it.
yeah, that became a slogan. And yeah, I mean, come on, dude. Like real Nazis existing in this climate, I think is impossible. If you look at them, they're even then they were very vocal at the start of what they wanted. Clear ruler, very nationalistic, and all the other races were beneath them, and then the Jew was evil. They tried to at first they didn't really straight up say they were going to try to like wipe out the Jews, and they did kind of do some maneuvering where they did like red herrings, and they said, oh, the Jews did this is why we got to take them all out or take all the businesses down, etc. But on their basic front of like axioms, they were pretty damn right vocal, and they were very machine like too. They wouldn't, I mean, I find it very hard to believe. I mean, everyone gets called a Nazi is never a Nazi. Like people on the fringes of the right, I think today now would that just they wouldn't conform even then to that rule. You got the white ethno state people who believe, which is actually really the opposite, or they came from this whole idea of the left with the whole idea that black people cannot coexist with white people because there's a white supremacist state and they constantly put them down. So like, okay, well then let's just have a white ethno state with the main white people as the main star, and then just separate by race, which is really stupid. But they don't, even then they don't go to the part where they say and then the black people are lower and they're animalistic and they all like should serve us and stuff like that. And then yeah, I just don't think that power exists or is around in this climate.
Right, and I think as far as like etymology goes, like the word Nazi, I feel like it's evolved a lot and not in a good way. I think it's become a little bit too commonplace for people to say, I disagree with you and I'm not going to get past my own ego, so I'm just going to decide to hit you or hurt you, or publicly say I want to harm you. And the internet is huge, so you can publish that anywhere, and you'll find pockets of people that agree with you. Um, I don't know. It's annoying because you might disagree with somebody, and I get where they're coming from, right? I understand maybe someone is very vocal about their anti-Semitic views. Maybe they are misogynistic and they're very open about it. Perhaps they are openly racist, and if that's what they're saying, obviously that's not a good thing for them to be saying. And I agree, they should be told, at least talked to for a while. But if there's you really inflate that. You make it so that the sensitivity factor is so high that if someone says anything even questionable, partially questionable, like if they are out there blatantly saying, I hate all women should die, that's a little bit different from some guy online complaining about his wife that did a thing. But, we mentioned cancel culture before. I think it's kind of the same idea of people will dogpile on it, and it will swiftly go from, my wife annoyed me today, to this guy deserves to be thrown out in the streets and beheaded because he's a misogynist. And that's just the easiest case for me to use is misogyny. But you could do the same thing with racism. You do the same thing, like I mentioned earlier, a bunch of different things. And people are just so quick to decide to fight people that don't really deserve it. And I think that's only getting worse through our limited social interactions. But I mean, we were already limiting social interactions with the expansive use of the internet. But now that most things are required to be online because of a pandemic, it's only going to get where you're going to be pigeonholed and shoehorned into your own little groups of people that you know and you talk to all the time. You're not going to be interacting with others because why would you need to if you're online? You're going to be algorithms are going to force you back into your same hole. You're going to talk to the same people you're already friends with. You're not going to get this open discussion, which was already kind of quelled as it was, and it's constantly being suppressed. But if we're not in person, it's a lot harder to see them as human, and it's much easier to denote them and denounce that they are a Nazi and they're not a person. You know, um, yeah, I think it's a curse of online, and the fact that people don't want to be disagreed with, and that's even worse online. And now that we are mostly online, you start seeing it ramping up. I've seen it a lot on just my basic feeds through Instagram, even through TikTok, which is generally like a comedy thing. You still see that on
Yeah, I've
there.
seen some weird shit on TikTok. I saw
Yeah.
one about Holocaust survivors, people faking it.
Oh my
Just
God.
but it was like really macabre. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Oh yeah, but I wanted to backtrack. Although I did forget this, there has been idolatry, I think, of the Nazi movement. I have seen online, like people reading Mein Kampf and shit, which is very ironic considering that was just like a propaganda book, like something like Caesar wrote after he conquered Rome. But yeah, it's I don't think those people have it in them. Like they're weaklings trying to be iconoclastic. But yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. For me, it's been a lot. There is a big mob out there for anyone who comes across or uh, has a different opinion. I think there is a monolithic opinion right now that is completely antiseptic. You can't say anything racist. You can't say anything sexist, homophobic, transphobic, etc. You can be these things towards someone who doesn't say it right, right? You can do
Right.
whatever the fuck you want, which paradoxically makes me think this whole thing is bullshit. But there is like this overwhelming dogma, which is kind of scary. When I see it, I mean, I'm really seeing Athens. Just talking to some people today, and they all espouse the same shit too, like white fragility and whatnot. You know, stuff like that. I find it kind of hard. And they will view anyone opposing that as just racist, someone who's
Right.
trying to talk about it. Yeah.
They'll go
No.
to the deep end immediately. There's no middle ground anymore. There's no talking about, well, why do you think that way? And it's like, well, because of these things. And like, oh, okay, I get it. That's your experience. And it's interesting because it's so validating And most people that would say they want to go punch a Nazi, they are more than willing to talk with people in their communities about their experiences and validate most everything about how they feel. But when it comes to opposing viewpoints, there's no discussion. There's no, humanizing them. It's immediately they are an enemy and I want to fight them. It's not I want to like vote them out of, the Senate or something. There's no like, oh, let's be civil about it. It's like I'm going to immediately fight you, like guerrilla mode, no question. I hate you. You're not even human. And I don't like that. It's on both sides too. It's not just
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
yeah, it's on both.
Well, yeah, the Senate's so waterlogged right now on the whole government. I mean, when they tried to pass the, yeah, I mean, both sides won't even see each other. When they tried to pass the police reform bill, I think it was the right who did that. Republican, I mean, the Democrats wouldn't even accept it just because the other side passed, and it goes back and forth. With the COVID pandemic, each side was blaming each other for the increase in death in it, which, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, you can't really throw all those dead people on someone's doorstep for the blame. I mean, it's a disease that happened rapidly. Um, sorry, a virus that happened, and trying to say it is not like a thing of nature. I think was very stupid. But they all use that as just everything's weaponized. Anything's for political gain. The masks now are, I've heard a lot of people speaking, are now political statements almost in themselves, at least, which is kind of crazy. But yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, there's never a point of agreement, it seems. And even on something that on paper sounds like the absolute right thing to do, like I would say if we're talking about a topic of like the stimulus package, right? Where like the COVID stimulus package where people had to stay home, they need to give money to their citizens so they can live. There was still so much contest in that about whether or not it's getting passed, and then the amounts that your citizens were getting went down drastically, and then there were certain regulations as to whether you had to like check boxes to even be considered to get the money, you know, and people. There's been topics in the air, people discussing the possibility of a second one, and I'm like, no, there's no way we're getting a second stimulus package. It was impossible for us to get the first one. Like it's a miracle we got that. And that's because what sounds like an obvious thing. Yes, we should give our people some money if they can't work so they don't die, but it wasn't. And I don't even think it was about people disagreeing about the pandemic or disagreeing about the dead. I think it's what you were saying is that they didn't want to be the side that is going to take the blame. So it just didn't go through because they were arguing, and they hated each other so much. It was a personal thing. It wasn't an economic thing. I mean, it may have been for the larger companies, but they ended up winning out on that anyways. And it
No, yeah.
wasn't.
Although to be honest, I'll disagree with you on this. I think that is a pretty political thing. The stimulus package in itself, the government stimulating the economy and citizens, that would be a thing that the right would be against on an issue of economic basis. This theory that basically everyone will be paying for that in the long term with through their taxes and whatnot. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh no,
disagree
you're
with you.
good. No, you're good. And I'm welcome to disagreement, unlike a lot of people that we're talking about today. Um, and that I agree with that. But I mean, if you look at it from this is a not even a once in a lifetime situation, but this is a global pandemic. This is obviously a problem. We need to set aside some economic things and definitely our own political disagreements, since if we're all, in charge of people in this country, then that should be our main idea is to look after them. Um, so, I mean, to me, it sounds like a no-brainer of we need to just agree on this. So, and maybe I sound like a left-wing hippie on that one, but uh, I'm trying to come at it from a very scientific view of you have these many people dead. The very least you can do is help them to not die by incentivizing them to, stay home, which is the
Wait, so
scientific
you get
agreement.
dead people money to stay home so they don't die?
No, your citizens to stay home so they don't die.
Okay.
Sorry if I said
Yeah,
dead people, that's my bad. But um
it'd be pretty
but
fucked up. We do it to like the immigrants.
What's that?
It'd be really fucked up if we didn't do it to like the immigrants, only American citizens.
Oh, I don't even want to get into that topic. That's a
I
whole
just see like
can of
Italians walking
worms. That's a
the
whole
street.
can of worms right there, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there was a lot of debate in the Senate about that. A
For
lot of
sure.
people, I think there was a debate too, should the illegals get and stuff like that, which confused me. Like, well, if they're here illegally, how are you supposed to give them the
Right.
money?
How do
How
you
do
give
you
it to
find
them?
them? Yeah, yeah. It's pretty stupid. When George Floyd died, we had some people just throwing his death on the other people's doorstep. That was a comment by Pelosi saying someone was, blamed for his death. Pretty crazy. You get to a point where it's a mob. Um, you can't, but you get a lot of people are scared. Like people around that whole Chaz area were like scared, right? 'Cause, 5 people got shot in it. If you're a business owner there, they aren't like doing anything about it, and it's just like you can't speak out against it because then they're gonna know you're speaking out, and then you're gonna be ousted. And it's just having that kind of mob rule is not good. That needs to be dealt with. Because there is
Right.
no debate within it. It's just animalistic, just anarchy. A lot of them are self uh, proposed anarchists or anarcho communists, whatnot. But I don't know how they're supposed to achieve communism by doing all that. But yeah,
So one thing I think a lot of people that would want to go live in the Chaz community or in like communes, stuff like that, where they're, it's kind of a lawless land, right? An area where you can quote unquote be yourself and live your life. I think a lot of where they're coming from in their mindset, I can partially understand some of it, right? So I lead my life in a pretty straightforward way. I
it's
always
kind of
plan my
repressive.
things
But
out.
I don't know. I think you can.
No, I'm trying to get to the point that so I lead my life in such a way that it is very like it's planned out, it's scheduled. I'm very straight laced in what I do and where I go and my work and whatnot. But every now and then I do enjoy chaos. I enjoy some chaos to be thrown in there so that life doesn't stay boring all the time. And I think these people that are interested, they're saying the anarchists, they're a very extreme version of this, but um, people
Wait, did you
that there's
think
that what
they're like LARPing it? They're like kind of living an idea of anarchy for a little
I
temporary time.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think that these people just can't either can't live that second half, that majority of it, which is like the straight laced. You do what you're supposed to do. You do your job. You be a good citizen. Either they just can't do it because they're incapable, or they're like thrill seekers, right? So they're maybe hyped on the idea of, oh, I love all the chaos. I'm not responsible for anything. I can do whatever I want. I've talked with a few people who are so far down on their luck in life. Everything they do, their family sucks, their job sucks. Every other prospect they have is not real. So they have been like, oh, I just want to go live in an area where nothing matters because obviously nothing's working. And if that's the idea, then there's a problem with that person and their life. And areas like the Chaz area, like you said, are destined to fail because if all these people are just trying to live in a place where they don't have to be societally held down by anything, so they aren't responsible, I guess, for an amount of time, then nobody's responsible, and then nothing works. So, uh, I guess my take from this is that anarchy does not work. Anarchy is greedy, and anarchy is very silly. It's fun for a while, but you got to realize it can't last.
Yeah, it lasted for about a week. I think the third day and people started getting shot. But
Right.
yeah. Also the fact that it coexisted in a state with rules, right? So think about if you're a crack dealer and then there's an area right next to you where you, you can't get busted if you're selling
Right.
it. So there was probably a big influx of drugs being passed around that area too,
Well, I'm
which
certain.
probably led to probably maybe what those shootings could have been. Yeah. I know what you mean. The people down in life, I think that's a manner of spiritual decay too, where they can't and they think the state could fix these things, or a state of nihilism could somehow justify it.
Mhm.
But yeah. not really. It's hard for the people who are hurting like that, but rather than aggressing on society, they gotta find some solace in themselves, I guess. That sounds kind of talking down to them, though. I'm sure there's a better way to phrase that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, but like I know what you mean in that like they are having trouble elsewhere in life, and that they find it, like you said, somewhat nihilistic, somewhat depressive, that it's not easy to find a spot. So it's enjoyable to live in an area where everyone is like that, where everyone is just fucked over, and everyone agrees that anything can happen, at least for a while, until they realize, whoa, these people are a reflection of me, and I'm not doing great because these people aren't doing great. So maybe I guess my big hope out of all that is if people decide to be anarchists at some point, they realize I can be better. I can improve upon myself. I don't have to pretend like destroying things and wanting to rebel against everything out there because everything sucks for me. At some point, maybe they can just sit down and be like, I can improve myself, I guess. And that, like you said, that still kind of sounds like I'm talking down to them because I definitely lead a privileged life. But, I mean, it's a mindset. I don't know.
Yeah, the concept of privilege too is kind of damning in itself, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
This whole area of class inequality, I remember reading about in the Victorian area, you had a lot of that, but people were able to coexist among themselves. You think too, these poor people think that, if they have these riches, their problems will be solved, but that void will still exist, and they'll probably find themselves worse off than they were before, and they'll still try to grab out with it. And not even improve yourself, I feel like, to some extent, but just find acceptance somewhere and be okay with the world where you're at the moment, and then be able to move on from there and then work on improvement. But yeah, it's pretty hard. I think a lot of people think the answers lie within this, somewhere amongst this chaos, so they're going to find some stream of inner fortitude or rest within themselves. And it's just, I don't know. Nature just set its course though in this. I mean, this mindset of like straight up aggression and shit, once it's gone in, I mean, it has to either burn out or be struck down. So we're in a pretty frightful state, I think, at the moment. When it gets to the election, depending on who wins, I think, yeah, either way, it's going to be really rough.
Right. I'll agree with that. It's a very uncertain time, like you said, especially since we haven't really locked down the whole COVID thing yet. And that only lets people stay at home and amplify their thoughts and disagree with each other. And politics are the number one thing people will get angry at each other about. It's not even about personal disagreement at that point. It's about my team is right, your team is wrong.
Yeah.
So you will see a lot more people using terms like Nazi, because they're like, well, I just don't agree with the left wing candidate. I'm going to vote right. They're like, wow, I didn't know you were a Nazi. Or even if you're voting third party, like I'm going to vote libertarian or something, for example. Like, oh my God, you disagree with me. And it's the same thing on each side, and it's only going to be worse this time. This time around, I think this is going to be like the most. Trying to think of the word. I don't want to say violent, but like the most contentious election I think we've had to date, and just there's so many boiling points about to hit all across the nation, and I'm not sure what the next, I'd say 10 years, but probably less than that, probably like 5 years really hold for this country. It's going to be an interesting case study for sure, and I just hope we make it through.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say the contentious to a date because we still got a civil war when Abraham Lincoln was elected, and then half the
Mm.
country seceded, which hopefully won't happen again.
Well,
But
let's
yeah, I
say
think
in the
that,
modern era.
yeah. That'd be bad though. I think they seceded, and it was a rule that everyone had to agree on it or something. I think that's national. Man, I probably fucked that up. But they threw a law aside, and they're like, whatever, we're out. Yeah,
And
yeah. Let's see.
You know,
Yeah, I guess we.
speaking of like secession and everything, this is totally off topic, but Texas has been constantly trying to secede, and I wonder if we're ever just gonna let them at some point.
Yeah, I mean they're big enough state, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
I wonder if we like let them secede and like they'll turn into England, where each person in that state has a different accent. Be kind of cool.
Would they use like different money? You think they'd change over to like Texas dollars or something?
We'll have to like open trade negotiations
Oh
with
my
them.
god, it's like 3 times the size of an original dollar.
It's got like a buffalo on it.
No, those comically large checks they bring you when you win like the lottery or something that you always see. That's like a $1 bill in the United State of Texas.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, let's see what. Did you hear about Leafy's termination on YouTube?
Did all of his stuff get deleted?
Yeah, his channel just got shut down after he did this Pokemon nuke thing.
Oh, he came back?
Oh yeah, he came back after Keemstar said he was going to be able to exist in his current climate, and he like
Oh,
clipped that on every single video. And he was actually, I was actually listening to him for a minute because he was just like being honest about everything and saying how like stupid it was. But then he did this whole content nuke on Pokemon. And then there was like a clip from like one guy, like I think his name was Turkey Tom. He's like, Pokemon has a really interesting personality, and she has a lot to the content she delivers. And Leaves like, no, she doesn't. Kind of the
I mean,
whole hard truth that we hadn't heard in a while, I feel like, and it kind of appealed to me, even though a little bit hypocritical considering I was fan Idos. But yeah, they just shut it down. It's kind of creepy. I don't think they've given a word on it. They
I
just,
guess
you know,
I'm
they
not
use.
too surprised about that though, because I mean, Leafy was already very, against the grain, kind of edgy, and people were already kind of sick of him whenever he left. So I guess him coming back doesn't really
Yeah, he was getting
surprise.
up though, which is crazy, and then boom, just shut down. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
I can't say I'm surprised. I haven't watched that video yet, but I guess it's gone now. Maybe someone's
Yeah,
re-uploaded it.
yeah, on another site. They had like this YouTube re-upload site that I think I found because the norm shit got shut down. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Like
pretty
Norm,
YouTube's.
like Norm Macdonald.
Yeah, he had this podcast series, and then he had a show on Netflix, and he had to take it all down because it was like uh too much, I could say.
How is it too much? Like
So like, he had like a
Norm.
gay guy on. He had this really fun. Oh God, I'm gonna forget his name. But he was clean during the time. He's like, oh yeah. So is it hard not sucking a whole lot of dick right now? Just really funny shit. And he was cracking up at it. He was having a riff with him, but yeah, you just can't like talk like that. And then he had a comment too. Where he was on Howard Stern. He's like, I don't think the only person who would be able to understand that joke would be someone who had Down syndrome.
Well, actually, that's kind of interesting though, because speaking of like people just hating each other based on like very simple jokes or things that they'll say about like the other sex or a certain gender or race or whatever, a comedy is in a really weird space right now, right? Where I watched recently. I really like Eric Andre, I like the Eric Andre show, but I watched his most recent Netflix
Eric
thing.
thing. Sorry.
Uh huh.
Have you heard about the Eric Ellen DeGeneres thing?
I have, yeah. I don't. I can talk about that in a second. But the point I was trying to get to with
Yeah,
the Eric Andre thing, he released a new stand-up on Netflix, and I watched it, and he was still his Eric Andre character, very big and loud and screaming and all that. But all his jokes and his punchlines were things that you would like. They were in agreement with the social consensus on things.
mm,
They weren't against the grain in any manner. They weren't necessarily chaotic like I'd expect from him. They weren't going outside the box. Like everything there was a punchline against the police or against Trump or against like something totally unrelated, something totally, harmless, which to be fair, I do like the harmless comedy. I like when you can find comedy in something that doesn't have to be mean or dumb like that. I think that's very fun. But a lot of his jokes were agree with me politically, agree with me socially, and now laugh at it, and it's a way of kind of keeping face in a modern era. And what's fun, I don't want to say what's fun, but an interesting thing that I saw whenever people were talking about The Office, right? It's a show people really like, and they were like, "You guys should reboot it" and all that. And Steve Carell, a pretty like not offensive guy in any way in his comedy, always been kind of clean, fun. He's like, we couldn't reboot The Office because of political climate nowadays. And if they couldn't reboot The Office now because of the jokes they made back then, that really kind of shows you that there's no room for making fun of anything right now. The comedy is pretty dead at the moment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean everyone's getting ousted. I think Kimmel got ousted for doing blackface like in the '90s.
You're right.
Yeah. Even to go back on Ellen, I don't think they really even found anything wrong with Ellen. They're like, yeah, she's just a bitch in a workplace, and then that somehow led up to her workforce getting investigated.
Right.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Yeah, everyone is just like attack each other. But yeah, comedy. I mean, for it to really work is when you like go across the line. That line's just too drawn. Like Dave Chappelle, he had that one segment when he went back on Netflix about the transgender people, and he got in so much shit for that. But I mean, that was like pretty funny. And like it was funny because he also did a stand up after reacting to it and just seeing like this new climate and how like ashamed I guess he was of it.
Right.
He like kind of dropped out for a minute, but yeah, it's pretty bad, man. I don't really 'cause, I mean, everyone. Louis C.K. has been dead for a while now, and he was such a funny stand up dude, and it really sucks about that. I'm trying to think of other comics. I mean, yeah, Norm too. Norm's always been the underdog though, so he'll probably make his way
Right.
back.
And I think Norm is a really good, I guess, example of like a really good prime example of like you're saying, he was making jokes about being gay, and that's not like you can't do that nowadays without people hating you. And that's, we mentioned like comedy is about shock, right? Comedy is about going to the edge and pushing what is acceptable because everyone there understands that it is a joke, right? But I don't think people understand that things are jokes anymore. And I'm not saying that to be like Leafy is a
No,
here
I get.
style thing, where it's like,
Yeah,
oh, it's just a joke, bro. Like, obviously, it wasn't a joke. You're being mean. But in comedy, you go to see a comedian in a comedy show, they don't think those things. They're doing it because it's funny, It's appealing to
yeah,
the darkest sense of our humor. It's appealing to that which divides us can only make us stronger united once we joke about it.
yeah.
And yeah.
I think too that you get so many of these comedians who become news pundits now, and it's like they all throw in this politics with like a joke because it's like the only medium people could take the news now. Well, we got John Oliver in his HBO show. You got Trevor Noah, used to be
Yep.
Jon Stewart, and all these a lot of people on the right. Gavin McInnes. Who else from that? Milo was pretty big for a while, but it's stupid. Like, but yeah, there's like a political narrative now they have to tell with their shit. A lot of these transgender or like not even that gay comedians that come on only can say their comedy from like the lens of being oppressed to some extent.
Right.
That really destroys them, I think. And like for example, like making fun of Trump, that's good humor. He does some funny ass shit. But it's like when it's done to tell a political narrative and when it's so saturated when everyone's doing it, it becomes kind of less funny. And then the thing that you really don't want to say is the one you kind of like don't want to laugh at, but you do. That's kind of like the thing. And yeah, it is an area of humor, and it's not usually intrinsic to your values, I think, to some extent. Although I don't know, there's some divide to that. But yeah, but now it is your intrinsic values basically
Right.
trying to.
You have to be you aren't playing a character anymore, right? You're yourself up on the stage if you're doing comedy. And the way people see it is that is you saying that and you believe all of those things. That is not, Louis C.K., the stand-up comedian, as like the comedian. He is Louis C.K. as the man. He believes all these things. He's saying all of these things. It's not that there's no separation in art from artist anymore. It's all artist, and
Yeah,
I really
yeah,
hate that. I really hate that. Like, I get if someone did something legitimately horrible, but even then sometimes I'm like, I still like their art. Like one of my John Kay, he's an animator. He made Ren and Stimpy, all that back in the day.
God bless you.
Yeah, so he's an interesting guy. Did some really shitty stuff to a lot of the women that worked with him because he could. It was very, sexually not responsible. Anyway, he took advantage of his position. But although I disagree with the stuff that he did. I'm still like, but his work is so vital to the industry and understanding it. And it's the same thing with comedy. You can't hate a guy, you can hate a guy for him, but you can't hate a guy for his content. Um, And sometimes those are vastly different. Like Eric Andre, obviously a very nice dude, very upstanding in his beliefs and never done anything wrong. But his content, if you just watch the show, is bad shit. And some people would disagree with that and think it's weird and wrong. But I don't know. It's a strange
The people
degradation.
who always get offended it are getting offended on the behalf of others too, which I always find
Right.
stupid. So usually, I think in most cases, the people who should be offended on are just kind of like, no, I mean, this is stupid, which is really aggravating. But yeah, I got the perfect example for that. Roman Polanski, very good director. He made Repulsion, Chinatown, Knife in the Water. He raped a girl who was 12 years old, and he tried to do it. And then like Jack Nicholson, I think, walked in on him because he was in his house. Crazy story. But yeah, he went to France, and he won like he basically was hiding in France, and he has been since that happened, like in the 70s. But he's getting a film award and shit, and people were like trying to boo him and like throw him out. But yeah, I mean, his art is still. I'm still gonna watch his movies. It's good. He's a terrible person, but to some extent, it's separate from his mind, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And I talk to many people, and most of the time I bring up that concept of separation of art from artist. Most people actually disagree with me. They want to lump the two together, and I think that's really wrong. I think that's A, robbing yourself of an enjoyment of some kind of art, and B, forcing you into this just terrible mindset of anything somebody says is exactly what they believe and they will always believe, and
And
there
then
is
you're
no
promoting it by
character.
engaging it. That's a big point too.
What was that?
You're promoting it by just engaging it.
Right,
Just
and
like
that's not true.
just yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Like
crazy.
we
Sorry.
mentioned Sam Hyde a little bit earlier, right? He has this horrible image that most people know him by, but I view his stuff. Yeah, I think he's just some irreverent comedian that's just trying to force a reaction, and if that has to be something that everyone disagrees with, he does it, and it's funny, and I like that. I like that in art. I like what he's trying something that most people aren't right now, and he's getting rejected from the Joe Rogan podcast, which is not like the super left wing thing I would imagine it to be. It's more open with its guests and its ideas. But even them, they are like, no, we're not going to invite this guy on because he's done this and this and this and this in his jokes and his shows and his comedy. I'm
Yeah.
like, can't you guys like you guys are you're making something? Can you not see the idea behind it? Maybe not. I don't know. But like
Yeah.
I watch Sam Hyde, and I don't agree with the jokes he makes. I just think they're funny.
Yeah. 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 I think so too. A lot of right wing people like him too, though, because in some ways he does kind of echo their values in some sense, which is kind of sad because we're talking about that separation. But yeah, I think everything's linked right now. My favorite thing he did was when he was doing that Rutgers thing when he was showing all this Renaissance art and had like this beautiful score to go along with it. And it goes like for a 5 minute segment, and then he goes to like what the people their graduate students were doing, and it was just like a bunch of dildos that someone did. And he's like, "This is what y'all are doing compared to this. Y'all can never go up to this standard. All y'all need to quit." He's telling us the bunch of students who are paying in the college.
Right.
Yeah, it's just very good performance art. I think. Yeah.
Right. Right.
I think H3H30 someone called in and asked him about that, and Ethan was talking about how he had a scene with him where he yelled at him. Sam I yelled at him like during a public thing, like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And he got scared, and he was like, "Yeah, he was scared." He thought that he threatened him, and it was so awesome.
What?
Yeah, you need to look it up. It's pretty funny.
Interesting. Uh, yeah, it's crazy. The world is things are very mixed right now. Things are very uh sort of looking for like quick to catch fire.
Yeah,
Volatile.
it's so
Volatile.
antiseptic, dude. I don't find real solace in much of anything now. There are a couple of movies good come out, but I mean, most of the shit I'm going right now is back in time. You get a couple that come out, but they can only for the only way to art really come out. I think this is through some dark and twisted form. And really any culture, underlying culture, is getting thrown away. For people, I guess for people's lack of understanding it, lack of erudition in the field, but just just like sheer ignorance of it, and that's so sad. Like poetry, has gone. I was talking to this chick, and she was really into Rupi Kaur, which is like a woman who got famous by posting like her menstruating in panties, and then she got banned. You're like, this should be my right, and then that's what got her famous in the door. And then she just does these poems that would just call it that would be light, no metaphor. It's just a nice little thought, and it's usually in free verse. And she sometimes forces iambic on it, but it's not poetry. It's just like a lack of understanding of the medium. And when you look up poetry on YouTube, this is going to be what you mostly find are these bullshit Instagram poets, rather than no one talk about Lord Tennyson or Sylvia Plath or even Shakespeare or any shit like that. It's pretty sad. I don't know, man. I'm just waiting for some art to enjoy get enjoyed in.
So I might be on a little bit of an opposite spectrum, I guess, from that. I don't know this poet at all,
Yeah.
but as far as it comes to art and music and writing, I think the idea has become so, like, the idea of what is and isn't music or art or poetry or writing, it's just so old and dated. Like, I understand if you want to go for a certain, no, I'm being honest about this. I think if somebody can put a dot on a paper and sell it as art, the idea of art does not exist anymore. If someone can just put the letter A and sell it as poetry, the poetry doesn't exist. The medium doesn't exist. Now there are parts of it that obviously you prefer, but uh, I don't know. I I think personal taste is really taking over, and that you can't just call something is or isn't a certain thing, because nothing is or isn't that thing anymore. Everything is just something that happened. Uh, and I mean, no, it's true. That's the way I see it. I mean, if I want to be, you want me to be, if you want me to view it as like a musician, right? So it has to be 4/4 time. It has to have this drum. It has to have a guitar. It has to have a lead, rhythm. But no, there's lots of music I enjoyed that has a lot, like almost none of that. It's just noise, and that's it, and that's fine. I think things are just degraded so far down that it doesn't really matter what those things are anymore. And if she's making money by selling quote unquote poetry, great for her. I'm good. She's gamed the system in a way that works. So I don't blame her for doing that, but I understand if you have zero interest in it.
No, I believe she'd be sent to the gulag. I get what you mean, dude, but that's for me, like everything being subjective, no objectivity. It's just very disconcerting me. I'm very much admirer, I guess, of form. And to be honest, yeah, part of it is right. If this is what she gets paid for and paid to do, it does show where society is at. Yeah, Tekashi 699 doing a music video with Cardi B. You don't understand what the fuck they're talking about, except like I got a gun and pussy or something like that, and
Hey
that's like
man,
a whole song.
that's music, bro. That's
Yeah,
selling.
and
That's music.
everyone's into it. I mean, it just shows that I don't know, values right now are just pure base instincts and nothing more. Yeah.
I
I
can
hope
agree
there's a
to that.
big resurgence because one thing goes white and one thing goes back, and then we'll probably have like a super puritanical reign when we get like in our 60s where like no one can do it. And that'd be pretty funny.
No, I agree. I agree that a lot of creative endeavors right now are either A, trying to make money, so they're gaming out as much as possible, like that woman probably is, like the modern rappers are probably gaming it really hard. But I think as long as my view on it is, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. If it's music, fine, it's music, but I don't have to like it, I guess, is the way I'm seeing it. Um, and since abstract art is a thing, abstract music is a thing, and abstract poetry is a thing. So I think once you break down barriers of what is and isn't a thing, it doesn't matter whether you consider it a thing or not, because it is that thing, and you can't change it. You can disagree with it and you can not like it, but there's no changing that it is that thing.
Right, yeah, and I would say your ideas are axiomatic to the modern people now, especially with morality. What is or isn't wrong? Is it wrong to do this to a woman, or is it wrong to do this to a man? was it wrong when the police did this to, George Floyd? What is the protocol? Well, we don't know. I disagree with it, so that stands for ad fiat rule, and that is.
I think everyone has to have clear separation in how they view things. I'm speaking strictly in art. When it comes to morality of humans, I'm very clear in my delineations of what I think is and isn't right.
Okay, I said that because I knew people who actually do think that.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not dumb. I just understand that art doesn't matter. So art can be whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
Now, if you're killing a man for no reason, that's totally different than someone made a song called it rap, even though it might not be what you call rap or what you call poetry. Because that doesn't matter. Killing a person matters. Music doesn't.
But if you kill someone like Ted Bundy and you do like a 4-hour documentary on butterflies, but it's like really good, it's still okay to watch that documentary on the butterflies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's where I'm agreeing. Okay. That'd be kind of cool if he did that, but he didn't.
No, yeah. And you see that I have like these different takes on a bunch of different things. And I think a thing we like to talk about is that people will just agree with the modern consensus on everything, and they won't form their own opinion on individual pieces, right? So we just talked about three separate ideas about human morality, about art, and then about art versus artist. So kind of in the same vein, about whether you concern their moral compass to yours and what you think about art. And I think a lot of people would just say, oh, if they did a bad thing, I hate them, I hate their art, I don't agree with them, and I'm going to always think that. They're never going to have separation in their mind. They're never going to think about it critically. They're never going to form their own opinions because they just want to be on the winning team, whatever team they perceive that to be.
Yeah, I mean, that makes some sense. Yeah. Cool. Well, you got any other ground you want to cover? Anything?
I caught a cockroach the other day. We have green cockroaches down here. They're called Cuban cockroaches. Yeah.
Cuban cockroaches.
Yeah, you can Google it. They're really cool looking. And I caught one, and I'm very happy because it's the first one I've ever caught. So.
You gonna sell it?
No, I'm not gonna sell it. I'm just gonna pin it and put it in my collection. I'm gonna keep it.
Probably sell it to Cuba.
Yeah, to Cuba.
What's called Cuban cockroaches?
I'm pretty sure they came from Cuba or somewhere around in that area. They got imported into Florida, since a lot of things get imported into Florida.
Imported a cockroach? Why?
Well, on accident. Like most things are accidentally brought over. And they thrive in Florida, and they've kind of moved up the coast to where I am now, so they also live here. So they're an invasive species, but so what? Like
kudzu?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, kudzu was brought over intentionally as an ornamental thing, and yeah, a lot of things are brought over on accident.
Yeah, someone told me about Australia. Basically, when the British ruled it after it became penal colonies, they're like, wow, this needs to look a lot more like Britain. So they started bringing all these animals over there. And so that now it's like a crazy just cesspool of animals, horses, a bunch of weird different types of like animals. And they actually, this guy was telling me he was a wildlife dude over there. Like he was trying to in the process of controlling like these all this animal life, because they were just basically overtaking everything, like pigs too. They said in some cases they streamed because the hunters weren't killing enough of them. They had helicopters shooting down. And I'm like, oh my god, that's so
right.
weird.
No, I mean, so like feral hog, pigs, if you let them, I don't know if you know this. So if you have like a pig, you've domesticated it, it's tamed down, doesn't have its tusks, has its fur is way less coarse. If you let pigs back into the wilderness, they will re-evolve into their wild type within like 5 generations. It is very fast. They'll become boars like immediately. Yeah, and they are ravenous. Wild pigs can destroy entire ecosystems, so that's why they want to get rid of those. But especially in Australia, they're the cane toads. Those are an invasive species, and they eat everything, and they're massive. And people will just run them over just for fun because they're everywhere. No one cares. You can look those up. That's a really interesting invasive species in Australia.
Dude, that's crazy. Yeah, Australia's a crazy place. Like most of the inland is uninhabitable. It's like the little center stage because it's like the rest of the desert.
It's literally just the fringe sides of it near the ocean, right? Like Perth and fuck is the other one I'm thinking of? Sydney.
Yeah.
all that. It's literally on the sides. Like you either live in West or East Australia. You don't live in like Middle Australia.
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, oh, man, cool. Well, I guess that's enough coverage. I think we got about an hour, dude.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I'll get back with Joe Rogan. I'll see how he thinks about this. But yeah, then I'll post it. Cool, man.
All right, man.
All right.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, man.
Yep.